হাই ওয়েলকাম ব্যাক টু মাই চ্যানেল। আজ আমি অন্টারিওতে সংকেতিন সিটিতে ব্রোক ইউনিভার্সিটিতে এসেছি। আমার মেয়ে লোরাসেকর হাই স্কুলে পড়ে এবং হোল স্কুল থেকে সে একমাত্র সুযোগ পেয়েছে এই ব্রোক ইউনিভার্সিটিতে সাইকোলজি প্রফেসরদের সাথে রিসার্চ প্রোগ্রাম করার। আজ আমার মেয়ে সাইকোলজি রিসার্চ প্রেজেন্টেশন করবে এখানে, সেজন্য আজ আমি এখানে এসেছি।
Hi everyone, my name is Orlin, and for my mentorship project, I worked with Dr. DeVetti and her lab members at the Brain and Language Lab. So for my mentorship project, I worked on a preliminary investigation of eye gaze on sentence interpretation. Okay, so first of all, to start off, I'd like us all to envision that we're in a library. If I say, I like that book the best, just the way that I said it right now, does anyone have any idea as to what book I could be talking about? Shake yes or no. No, correct answer is no, because I didn't provide any social context. So social context would be either pointing at the specific book that I'm talking about, or either like looking at the book that I'm talking about. This is called referencing. Referencing is incredibly important in language, especially clear communication. So the sentence, I like that book the best, it makes sense, but is it clear? No, because there's no context. So as of date, there have been numerous investigations looking at referencing and eye gaze, especially in infants and primates such as like chimpanzees or monkeys. However, there has been none in healthy young adults. So to fill this gap, we decided to bring this perspective of research in the world of neuroscience and psychology. So previously at our lab, we've done some research that involves looking at sentences such as that and at. So as like example sentence would be, I like that book versus I like a book. And so the research has shown that individuals find sentences with that a little bit more hard to interpret or a little bit unclear than sentences with at. So to make this difference more significant, we wanted to expand on these findings and do another experiment looking at these differences. And in addition, we also looked at emotional affect. So this is someone's temperament. So there's positive affect as well as negative affect. Someone can be very high positive affect, which means they're very hyper, energetic, motivated, and then someone can be very low positive affect, which means that they're very low, very chill. And this relates to sentence interpretation because our research has shown that our positive affect system actually interacts with the grammatical interpretation. So for my project, we did two different experiments. In the first experiment, we looked at how individuals rated sentences with that and at. And in the second experiment, we added spaces with these same experiments to see whether if direct gaze, so looking directly at you, or if looking averted, like left or right, made any difference with the sentence interpretation. So for a hypothesis, based on our previous research, we predict that sentences with that will be rated lower on the naturalness scale than sentences with at. And then as for the faces, we predict that when there's a picture of averted gaze, so looking left and right, then individuals will rate the sentences with that higher. Because with my example, I like that book the best. If I look at the book, it will make more sense, right? It's more clear. So the confusion is gone away. And then finally, since we have research from our previous experiments showing that the positive affect scale does interact with the grammatical system, we expect to correlate our positive affect values with the sentence interpretation values. So for the methods, both of our studies were conducted on Testable, which is an online research platform. And this is really interesting because you can launch launch experiment worldwide. So for both of my experiments, we decided to launch them in subject pools in South Asian countries as well as Canada. So for the first experiment, we had 32 participants, 10 of who were female, and all of them were either native or near native speakers of English. And then for the second experiment, we had 34 participants, 8 of who were female, and then again, they were all either native or near native speakers of English. In addition to collecting their demographic data, we also collected their positive affect and negative affect scores, so we could correlate them to their interpretation values. And so we used the questionnaire, the PANAS questionnaire, which is a questionnaire that collects data on their positive or negative affect scores. So how did the experiment work? So for the first experiment, there was a screen with the sentence. And then it was participant controlled, so it wasn't timed or anything, but we gave the participants time to read the sentence, and then there was a Likert scale just underneath the sentence. The scale went from 1 to 7, 7 being highly natural, 1 being highly unnatural. So based on whether the sentence made sense to the participants, they would rate whatever they thought the sentence to be. And then for the second experiment, it was the same exact questions, however with the addition of the face. So the face would appear on the screen for 2 seconds, either with direct gaze or reverted left to right gaze, and then the face would go away. After the face would go away, the sentence would appear on the screen immediately after with the Likert scale. And then assuming that the sentence was uttered by the face, the participants would rate, again, if it was natural or unnatural. So here's a table showing the 2 conditions. For the first table shows our 2 conditions for our first experiment. So we have non-specific sentences, which are the sentences with a, and then we have our specific sentences, which are the sentences with that. And then the second table shows our 4 conditions. So we still have our 2 conditions from our previous experiment, but this time we have 2 more conditions with either the direct or the averted gaze. And we retrieved 6 male and 6 female faces from a database in Holland. So as for the results, for the first experiment, it was exactly as we had hypothesized. So in this Vineland plot, as you can see, the red represents the average values for A, sentences with A, whereas the blue represents the participants' ratings for sentences with that. So if you look at this, look at the horizontal line right here where the cursor is, that shows the average nationalist rating. So as you can see, the rating for A is higher than the rating for that, which aligns with their hypothesis. And then looking down here, we have our 4 conditions and the average ratings for the conditions. So this one right here, the green one, is the average rating for sentences with A with direct gaze. And then this one here is the rating for sentences with A with the averted left or right gaze. This one is the sentences with that with direct gaze. And then the last one here is the sentences with that with averted gaze. So as you can see, up here, people rated the sentences with that as 5.06 on a scale of 7 out of the national scale. With the faces, the mean ratings went up to 5.39 and 5.38, meaning the faces did make the nationalist rating for that better. And then correlating this with the positive affect scores. Here on the x-axis, we have the positive affect scores increasing. And then on the y-axis, this shows the contrast between A and that. So the bigger the contrast, that means that they found there to be like bigger of a jump from the nationalist. So as we can see, the people with the lower positive affect scores actually found a bigger difference between A and that, meaning that that was very unnatural and A was very natural to them. Compared to people who have higher positive affect scores, they saw less of a difference between the two conditions. So bringing it all together, does the social cue of eye gaze modulate interpretation of reference in sentences? And the answer to that is yes, but it depends on the participants. As we saw from the graph that I just showed, people with lower positive affect scores do notice this difference, and the eye gaze does make a difference for them. However, people with higher positive affect scores don't really see much of a big difference. So for them, the eye gaze didn't really do much of a big deal. As well, something that was really interesting was that our original hypothesis was that with the averted gaze, left and right, that would become better, right? More natural. However, if you look at the ratings again, for that with direct gaze, it was 5.39. And then that with averted gaze was 5.38, which is basically the same. So actually, it wasn't the addition of the gaze that made these sentences with that more natural. It was just the addition of the faces. So why is this the case? It could be the case that the addition of the faces just engaged the participants to pay attention more and be more motivated, and so that made them less sensitive to the grammatical anomaly. And this was actually perfect because with our previous work that said that lower positive affect people are more sensitive to grammatical anomaly, this worked perfectly because we could see that people with the lower positive affect scores had a bigger contrast. So in conclusion, yes, the social cue of eye gaze does modulate sentence interpretation, but more so for lower positive affect individuals. So for some implications, in the future, we do hope to relaunch this experiment again and increase our sample size to hopefully around 50 to further replicate our findings. As well, since we did notice a contrast between A and that for a healthy young adult population, we want to try this in a special population, so perhaps like schizophrenic population or autistic population, where they are more sensitive to eye gaze, and we want to see whether this contrast would be further dramatic or if there would be a contrast at all. And lastly, we would like to note that since most of our participants were from South Asian countries, it could be the case that since they saw these Caucasian faces, they assumed that they were native speakers of English and that the sentences would have no error at all. So they rated the sentence higher than they should have. So that could be called as the race effect. We're not really sure why it was just the addition of the faces that made this contrast, but it could be a race effect. And just before I wrap up, I would like to thank my prof who wasn't able to make it today, and my lab members, my teachers, and the program facilitators who have been so supportive and encouraging for me to do this valuable opportunity. Thank you. Any questions?
I just have one question. Is there a specific reason why your experiments looked into South Asian people, besides another different demographic people?
That's a really good question. So we did an experiment last year, like the lab members, not me. They did an experiment last year in South Asian countries, and they found that the participant pool was very rich. They were a really good participant pool. We've had some participant pools who just do the experiment just for the compensation. And so this participant pool was very well, so we knew, and because we were short on time, just had a few months, we wanted to do this experiment in a pool that we knew that was already good, paying attention, and would do the task well. So that's why we chose South Asian countries. Thank you for the question.